Our next speaker, a whole different aspect to our community, but one equally important. I can't think of more than maybe one. Our community survived and strengthened for many, many, many years on the nonprofit organizations that were formed, organized, created, and sustained for their service. And the man who probably spent more time away from his own job, pro bono, writing bylaws and articles of incorporation and policies and procedure manuals for these nonprofit organizations to exist legally and safely within the law, because in the early days, the least mistake and you were out. But he was always there. He also served on our city council as one of the most productive, and he was, for many, many, many times on the 6 and 10 o'clock news at night, the face of the Dallas City Council. He's our second speaker tonight. Would you please welcome the always remarkable and energetic Mr. Chris Luna.
Thank you, Michael. So first, it is a treat to be on the same evening program with three smart and strong and gifted women, and more importantly, three that are friends of mine. So I'm glad I can share the program with the other folks tonight. Now, I want to take you back to 1991. See if I can multitask here. In 1991, there was a young, leaner attorney who was running for the Dallas City Council. Now, the city had just implemented single-member districts. And so there was one district that Lori Palmer represented that had most of Oak Lawn in it. But it got split into two, into what is now District 2 and District 14. District 2 was going to have no incumbent because Lori was going to run in District 14. And I wanted to run in District 2. And even though I was out to my friends and out at work, I was a lawyer at Aiken Gump at the time, and out to most of my family, I thought about not running as an openly gay candidate. It had only been 4 years before when Bill Nelson ran and lost. The new District 2 was drawn as a predominantly Hispanic district, and I was concerned about being able to win. And so I had been on the board of OLCS, I had volunteered at the AIDS Resource Center. Well, Bruce Monroe, who was at that time was actually president of the DGA, the L came much later, was actually in that district. He was would have been a constituent. And John Thomas was an old friend of mine, and so I went to go talk to both of them and said, I want to run for the city council, but I don't want to run as openly gay. And if that's a problem, I need to know right now, because that's going to impact how I approach this campaign. And they both said, look, as long as you never deny it, that's okay with us. But as soon as you deny it, it is something that you are not proud of or not happy with, then that's a problem. And my commitment to them was, at that point, I mean, like I said, other than publicly running for office, I was not going to exactly go back into the closet. So I said, that's easy. That's something I will never deny. So that fall, 1991, I walked in my first gay pride parade. And it was exhilarating to walk down and to literally be able to hand out things, to talk to people. Of course, we had a truck behind me that had all the campaign posters on it and that sort of thing. And that fall, I was elected. And since I won by 157 votes, I think the strategy probably paid off and earned the nickname at City Hall of Landslide Luna. So, when I was elected, we inherited a lawsuit filed by Micah England. And we went to work to try to resolve that lawsuit. And at the at the Dallas Way website is a great first-person history that Micah and Paul J. Williams wrote about that time. I urge you to look at it. But basically, she was a lesbian that wanted to join the Dallas Police Department. And there was a question that said, have you violated the law, and will you likely violate it in the future? Well, of course, at that time, 2106 was still in the Texas Penal Code. She answered it honestly, and they bounced her. And so she filed a lawsuit in 1989. So what we tried to do was to adopt a policy that would no longer ask about that and no longer have sexual orientation as a decider on the police force. And so we did a resolution, we took it to the city council to vote, and it was an unbelievable experience. In January of 1992, the resolution went before the city council. The chambers were packed. And it was just unbelievable, the people that were there, the community supported the change. And what ended up happening was the city council voted down the resolution. That would have resolved the lawsuit, would have let Micah and other gay and lesbians join the police force. And it made the New York Times. And so from the January 24th, 1992 New York Times, for 5 hours, the council had been holding a public hearing on a proposal to end its ban on the hiring of homosexuals as police officers, a prohibition that was left unchanged. About 300 citizens spoke in the council chambers, and whether they spoke or for Agenda Item 77, almost all insisted the council faced a stark choice between good and evil. Voting 10-5, the council adopted a resolution at 2 a.m. that prohibited the police department from hiring individuals who have a documented or admitted history of committing or knowledge and intention to commit violations of the law. So we lost. But it was unbelievable because the community came together. And in fact, Bruce was quoted in the June 1992 D Magazine about that hearing when he said, it was a great day for the Dallas gay community. He says, straight-faced, January 22, 1992, that's the day the Dallas City Council, after 6 hours of public testimony, lasting until 2 a.m., voted not to allow Micah England or other gays to apply for jobs as police officers. About 1/3 of the audience decried gays and their cause. Quote, we saw lots. Hundreds of people who had never been to City Hall before. They stood up, gave their name, said they were gay, and asked for the law to change. I think the mayor was surprised there was such a strong gay contingent. And from that, I learned really the power the city council had to change and impact people's lives. Now, that fall, I think primarily because of my work on that, I was honored to be named the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade. My co-Grand Marshal that year was Jan Barton, who was one of the first. She was a straight woman, grandmotherly, one of the first who was really involved in doing food banks and taking care of HIV and AIDS patients. And she was the co-Grand Marshal. And the special Grand Marshal that year was none other than Michael Lee, who, as we all know and love, is Michael Doman. So from there, I just felt really energized. And that next March of 1993 was the big march on Washington. And I decided to go. And I think it was either David Taffet or Steve Shatsky, I'm not sure, said, hey, if you're going, why don't you get us a flag from City Hall that we can lead our contingent on the March on Washington. And this is that flag. And went to Washington, was empowered. Of course, at this point, Anise Parker was on some Houston city boards and commissions, had not even been elected to the city council yet. She got elected in 97. And so there was a Houston Chronicle reporter there who was interviewing some folks. And somebody in our group said, oh, you ought to interview our gay city councilman. And so I gave a great interview with this reporter from the Houston Chronicle. And after we were finished, I thought, all of my family lives in Houston. Now, all of my siblings knew about me. My parents did not. So that evening, and my parents were the kind who got the morning paper, read it, section 1 from the first page to the last page, section 2, first page, last page. And so that evening was the night I called my parents and came out to them. And it was, of course, no surprise. They had come visited me here in Dallas from Houston. And after the first or second trip, they stopped, asked, who are you seeing? Or are you dating anyone? And that sort of thing. And when I lived in this neighborhood and we would walk to dinner, I think they got it. I think they figured it out. So in the 1993 and 1994 parades, the Tavern Guild was very nice and would give us these horse-drawn carriages because we were on the city council. But it just wasn't the same as walking. Then in 1995, everything kind of changed. The city council updates our city codes from time to time, and we had a briefing on the personnel code. Very, very dry stuff. But in that code was where the city had its anti-discrimination statement. And at that time, it was very skimpy. I mean, I think it said maybe age and race and sex. And so by that time, in 1995, Craig McDaniel had been elected to the city council. And Craig and I went to work on how to amend the city policy to add sexual orientation, to add marital status, to add a few other things in there. And the strategy we came up with and worked with the folks at the DGLA and a number of other advocacy groups was really just to kind of be upfront, make the change, not call a lot of attention to it, and kind of merely go down the road. And so in January 11th, that came up before the council vote. We had worked with the city attorney to have the draft language, and we made a motion to amend the item, very kind of nonplussed. Motion was seconded. There was a little debate or discussion, and it passed. And so we thought we were kind of out of the woods. The Voice had a nice article. City Council amends non-discrimination policy to include gays, written by Tammy Nash, and it hit the fan. Because then the morning news picked it up, and it's like, oh, this happened. And then some of the council members then went to the city attorney and said, well, wait a minute, as part of the agenda, you have to list things on the agenda with enough specificity that people know what's going to be voted on and what's going to be considered. And so the then city attorney said, well, this is gray. It's subject to attack if somebody were to file a lawsuit. So my recommendation is that you vote on it again. So we agreed to put it back on the vote 2 weeks later. And let me tell you, in those 2 weeks, it was unbelievable. The work that was done to line up votes, to get the religious community to come testify, to get other communities to come testify, because we just viewed this as important and key that it passed. And once again, the chambers were packed. There was an overflow room upstairs that was packed. And it was another 6-hour hearing that went late into the morning. But this time, it was a different result. At that time, the first time it was voted on, it went 9-5 in favor with one absent. 2 weeks later, it went 9-6. The one person who was absent voted no, but it passed. And it was just unbelievable. Once again, the excitement. The Dallas Morning News reported, for the second time in 2 weeks, the Dallas Council approved a new policy Wednesday night to prohibit city employment discrimination against gays and lesbians. A packed city council chamber erupted in thunderous applause by supporters of the new policy as big screen monitors flashed the 9-6 vote. Backers jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering for several minutes as they congratulated each other and praised the council. And then the Voice had a nice article after the second vote that says, City Council reaffirms vote forbidding job bias against gays. Tammy Nash wrote that article as well. That, I think, was an absolute sea change, and I think the way the city and the city council approach things. And I always give a great deal of credit to my co-pilot, Craig McDaniel. We worked as a team. And Craig, I always like to keep the record straight, was the first openly gay elected, because when I ran in 91, as I mentioned, I did not run as openly gay. I came out later. Craig, when he ran in 93, ran as an openly gay man, and I give all kudos to Craig for doing that. He replaced Roy Palmer on the council. The other funny thing is, the other funny thing is, in that same election in 93, Paul Fielding was elected. And so we had 3 gay council members. And the funny thing is, every now and then, there'd be some city issue that the 3 of us would vote the same way. So it'd be, just us 3 voting one way. And so I remember one time it was about monkey food at the zoo. And everybody voted one way except us 3 voted no. I voted no because there had been either a minority or women-owned business that had submitted a bid that I thought should have been the one who got the contract. Craig, I think, was probably, wanted something that was either vegan or organic to feed the monkeys. And Paul was very, very thrifty and really looked out for the city budget, and he probably wanted to go with the cheaper bidder. And so one of my colleagues, Max Wells, came to me and said, Chris, we've been talking about this. What's the gay angle on monkey food? And, sometimes they just didn't get it. So the 1995 parade was glorious. And I went back to, in those parades, walking again. Because I just really liked walking in the parade. And like I said, the 95 one was great to walk in. In the 96 one is kind of a funny story. And it would have made the front page of the Morning News or the Voice had a photographer been there. The man that I was dating at that time, who then became my partner and is now my husband, we've been together for 19 years, was on the parade route there by the Melrose. And because I was walking, when I saw him, and he was shirtless, because talk about the heat, I took advantage of the situation to go over there and just see how the sweat on his nipple was. Like I said, it would have been a great photo. And I don't know, maybe in the archives of the Voice of the Morning News, it's there. They just didn't want to run it. But that is probably my favorite parade story. So let me close by telling you part of history is to learn from history. Why we do things. And so let me share with you 3 takeaways that I've learned from that time on the council. First, coalitions are key. The reason why, and when you think about it, in 1991, the policy went down, by a 10-5 vote. 4 years later, it passed by a 9-6 vote. Part of that was the coalitions. And it's just a matter of record. The African American council members on the first vote didn't feel comfortable because of some of the churches in their district and some of their constituents. 4 years later, We worked with the African American community to resolve those issues, and we got a letter from Coretta Scott King that said, if Martin was alive today, this is what he would want, and this is what he'd want to do. And so part of it was giving those council members some political cover, but it was that coalition building. Second, a seat at the table is critical. And let me tell you, as Michael mentioned in the introduction, I've done a lot of work with nonprofits. I've done a lot of work with other groups, and not all LGBT groups, by the way. And allies are important. But there's something about having a person at the table that can speak firsthand, that can say, let me tell you about my experience. Let me tell you about my discrimination. Let me tell you about my friends who've died because of HIV or AIDS. That is just, unbelievable. So, I'm a reformed politician, but as we think about elections and as we think about things, I think having a seat at the table is critical. And the last thing is change is incremental. I really believe that the change that we made in 1995 to change the city's anti-discrimination policy was the foundation and groundwork for the 2002 citywide ordinance to prohibit discrimination in employment and public accommodation, which was then the groundwork for the charter amendment that took place in 2014 that put that anti-discrimination provisions into the city's charter, which is kind of like our Constitution. And as you'll recall, it passed 75% of the vote. But many times, activists want the whole loaf. And it's all or nothing. And I'm just too pragmatic. I think change is incremental. And so as we look forward to new challenges, I hope we keep that in mind. So, thank you. In closing, as Michael mentioned, I'm going to be a judge at the parade this weekend. I'm really excited to be with my former colleagues, Councilwoman Lill and Councilman Finkelman. I hope you'll join us out at either the parade or the park and enjoy Pride.